So the UK has a big cousin marriage problem, imported from, you guessed it, Pakistan. And we have a Muslim MP by the name of, you guessed it, Muhammad, that doesn't want to stigmatize cousin marriage and actually spoke out saying that we should have health screening for people that are cousin marriage people rather than actually banning it. Now, why would you want to not ban cousin marriage when the harms are so clear, so obvious, and there's like literally no good reason for it? It's inbreeding. That's what it is. Why do we want to allow inbreeding? Why does a UK taxpayer have to pay the bill for this repeated cousin marriage problem, which is actually a big problem in the UK? Well, because I guess they want to marry their cousins. Let's get into it. Let's see what this guy had to say and why I think this is ridiculous. So to begin, I'm your friendly ex-Muslim. I talk about Islam and the issues related to it. This guy, he's defending cousin marriage probably because it's part of his religion. As you know, in Islam, Muhammad married his cousin. And I made a video all about how Zakir Naik defended cousin marriage, but he actually admitted it's bad, but then tried to make up a hadith to say that actually Muhammad didn't allow it over and over again.
Agreed that there are medical genetic problems in various ways. But this report is there when you have continuously generation after generation. And our beloved Prophet, that according to Dr. Ahmad Sakhari says, the Prophet said, do not marry against first cousins generation after generation. If you do it once or twice, it is no problem.
That video is going to be linked. But regarding this topic, what's happening here? What's happening is, if you look at the article, Conservative former Minister Richard Holden wanted to introduce a marriage prohibited degrees of relationship bill for further consideration, meaning that the current law prohibits marriage to a sibling, parent, or child, but not marriages between first cousins, right? So this is to protect women, right? He wanted to not only protect women that are forced into cousin marriage, but he also wanted to protect the state from the harms and the children from the harms of their parents being cousins, right? Again, that video goes into a lot more detail on the harms of cousin marriage, but at the very least, it literally causes genetic defects, it causes fertility issues, and depending on how many times it happens, it gets worse and worse and worse, right? But this guy is like, nah, we don't want to ban that. Why don't we just give them genetics cleaning? That's going to solve the problem. Is it going to solve the problem? Because most Muslims don't believe in abortion either. So even if they do genetics cleaning and they see all these health issues, they're probably still going to have kids anyways, right? So he's saying, rather than stigmatizing cousin marriages, a much more positive approach should be adopted to respond to health concerns linked to the children of his relationships. Oh, forget the children. We just have to be, you should be positive about it. We shouldn't stigmatize it. Well, why shouldn't we stigmatize it? It's harmful, right? It's like fetal alcohol syndrome. Why shouldn't we stigmatize it? Why shouldn't we stigmatize smoking when pregnant? We should stigmatize all these things. These things are bad for humanity, bad for the children, bad for society, right? And who covers the bill? The UK taxpayer, right? So he also spoke of the need to prevent so-called virginity testing and forced marriages, and also to protect the freedom of women. So he's like, I'm not trying to take away women's rights by, defending cousin marriage. The way to redress this is not to empower the state to ban adults from marrying each other. Well, we wouldn't want to ban adults from marrying each other, right? Even though we do ban certain categories of marriage. We ban polygamy. Polygamy is not allowed. We ban child marriage. So why don't we ban cousin marriage, right? He's like, I don't think it'd be effective or enforceable. Well, it would be a start. And he's saying it needs to be a health awareness issue, right? It needs to also be a health awareness issue, but why don't you start by prohibiting it? And the interesting thing is, this is extremely common, right? And this is the MP that wanted to actually ban it, right? He's doing a good thing. He wanted to actually help the society, right? But this guy's like, nah, let's just do genetics cleaning. And talking about genetics cleaning, I know an Arab Palestinian guy that can't have kids. Him and his wife are both cousins, and they've been trying to have kids, but they cannot. Despite doing IVF and taking all these interventions, they cannot have kids, right? So it was unlikely that this would have been a law anyways, as the article says, that these bills rarely become laws. The government said they're not, even though that the risks to first cousin marriage is clear, there are no plans to change the law. So this is not a priority, even though, there's extremely high rates of first cousin marriage, right? Including, interestingly, Irish travelers and the British Pakistani community. That makes the argument even stronger. It's not just targeting one community, but there's multiple communities, right? Health, freedom, and national values are the reason why he moved the bill. So, why do we want to, like he said, reinforce negative structures and control women, right? We don't want birth defects, right? And now, as an interesting side note, this is absolutely ridiculous to defend this. But anyways, as a side note, there's an interesting theory about how banning cousin marriage, or basically the West not doing cousin marriage, has actually helped society, the West, grow, right? There's an interesting podcast. Rafe Haidel Manku, a historian and broadcaster, he's been talking about things in the UK and British issues, and he actually discussed in an interview on the Trigger Pod podcast with these fellows. He quotes Harvard's Professor Joe Heinrich, who said that the Western mind evolved differently and was a global anomaly because of the 9th century Western Catholic Church's ban on cousin marriage. Up to that point, the structure of societies across the globe was defined by kinship clans. Large extended families where your first, second, and third, fourth cousins were part of the family's brothers and sisters. These clan societies were based on nepotism, obedience to authority, and conformity. Strangers were regarded with distrust and hostility. In the West, the ban on marriage between certain degrees of consanguinity resulted in the birth of a nuclear family which didn't exist elsewhere. Today, 75% of the world still has cousin marriage. According to Heinrich, approximately 90% of the world doesn't have the same notion of the exclusive nuclear family that we had. The birth of the Western nuclear family, devoid of its external connections to clanship, directly led to the emergence of individuality and innovation. With kinship clans destroyed, the nuclear family had to rely on contact with strangers. So basically, by getting rid of cousin marriage, we've created a society where it's not like the family, inbreeding amongst each other. Not to mention, think about what sort of effect this has on a society as a large, right? So these medieval European nuclear families were able to come together and cooperate for mutual benefit. So now they're cooperating with strangers, not just family. It's not this like my family versus your situation, right? So this is an interesting theory, right? And talks about how individualism and how the Western society has actually evolved different values because of the Catholic Church banning cousin marriage in the 9th century. So it's pretty interesting theory, right? What I do know is that this cousin marriage, which is actually a bad thing, is still practiced among Muslims at high rates, mainly probably because Muhammad did it. He married his first cousin Zainab. And so they don't have any problem with it. The religion that's supposed to protect you and actually help you and be better for you, it's God's divine law, does nothing to help you, yet it bans marriages between foster siblings. Foster sibling means that two unrelated people that suckled from the same woman. They're completely unrelated. There's no genetic issues, yet that marriage is banned in Islam. But marrying your cousin, who is your direct relative, who shares 12.5% of your DNA, that's perfectly fine, apparently, right? According to Islam. So this is the thing with Islam. It doesn't bring any good for humanity. Unfortunately, we have these people that are from the Dark Ages that want to bring us back to the Dark Ages, want to keep us in the Dark Ages because of the customs that they have these customs that are no good to anyone, but it's their customs, right? It's their values. And unfortunately, because the so-called perfect man did it, it's hard to get rid of these things, right? And so you end up with cognitive dissonance where they want to say, well, it's okay if you do it once in a while. It's not okay. You double the risk of issues, certain types of issues, with cousin marriage. Check the other video on cousin marriage for more details on Zakir Naik and how he invented a hadith in order to defend cousin marriage and defend his prophet. Anyways, that's all I have. Thanks for watching. This is your friendly ex-Muslim Abdullah Samir signing out. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new here. Join the Patreon if you'd like to support me. And of course, stay away from Islam.